talking about the shootings of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin and the fallings out, the NBA and other sports' response, the RNC convention, and a discussion on Luka's young career and a couple of NBA series previews. But as always, we start with first takes. Sean, how we living?
Living great, man. My first take is kind of a little plug on a book that I haven't even began to open. It just came in the mail from Amazon, ironically, because the book is called Let the Meat Tweets.
Shout out Jeff Bezos.
Let the Meat Tweets tells the story of how right-wing media, how the right-wing outrage media machine works overtime to provoke white conservative voters to the ballots while serving the interest of corporate America. So
fairly relevant today, I believe.
So attacking corporate America whilst buying the book via Amazon.
Yeah.
Should be a great read.
Absolutely. Jim?
Hey, man, just piggybacking on last week's discussion about the Postal Service. The Postmaster General testified in front of Congress and embarrassed himself. He didn't know how much a stamp costs. There's quite a bit he did not know about his own operation.
Just out of our own curiosity, how much does a stamp cost?
Fuck if I know. 55 cents, as a matter of fact.
Yeah,
55 cents.
there we go.
That stamp price is good forever, no matter what the inflation does in the future. Your 55-cent stamp today, that will buy first-class postage 50 years from now.
And that's an investment.
Assuming the Postal Service is still in operation at that time.
JB, we've had two semi not depressing first takes, and that is always time for JB's first take of the week.
Doom and gloom, man. No, we're gonna get into all this stuff, but pretty much from both segments, and even tying into the sports segment tonight, it's just kind of I'm due to be out of here, I guess, and on a plane in like 3 weeks. And it feels sad to say this, but it almost feels like it's an escape, because it feels like we're kind of very close to plunging into some madness here, even more than we already are. So it's kind of I'm sad to say it and sad to see it, but it's yeah, man. I think we're very close to being at a tipping point that maybe the country hasn't seen before. So it's kind of I don't know. So it's a weird feeling to feel for a moment that's normally a little bit sad, to leave your family and friends, that now it's almost like a release.
Yeah. So my first take is we started back on workouts this week, and honestly, it's weird, but I forgot how much I enjoyed doing my job. How much better it is than working from home. And I'm someone who, once I get into my habit, I can figure it out. Like, I got used to my weight room times, and I got used to my times where I'd sit on the laptop, my Netflix times, and I got into that, and I enjoyed it for a few weeks, and forgot how much I enjoyed working with the guys. It was a little bit different, socially distanced. Everyone had their own basketballs, not able to really coach within a proximity, having to do things a little differently, but it was just a lot of fun to have some sweat equity and get back in the gym. So that was first thoughts from everybody. Topic number one of the day is Jacob Blake, a black man who lives in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was shot multiple times in the back by police after he walks around his car and leans into the driver's seat. That has created more protest, more unrest, and not only in Wisconsin, but in all over the country. So we just kind of open this up to you guys. We'll go ahead and start with JB on your guys' thoughts on the situation.
Man, it's really tough to admit that we've entered an era where seeing people shot by the police on camera is it's not an everyday thing, but it's an every other day thing now at this point. So to see, no matter what the circumstance is, no matter if it's even if it's two evenly matched people fighting each other, to see somebody shot on camera is a bit unnerving. And we've almost become numb to it. And so after seeing the evidence that's come out and seeing what we've seen, it's just super, super unfortunate that it got to that level. And so as we'll discuss later, I just think that with protocols followed, and with if training was done properly, I feel like there's a lot of things that could have happened before it came to the point of shooting an unarmed guy 7 times in the back in front of his kids. And so, like I said, there's more details than that. It's nothing these days is black and white, but in this case, you would like to believe that there's some sort of recourse that that could be explored before a guy gets plugged 7 times in the back.
Absolutely. Sean?
Yeah, Justin, you're right. It's kind of it's sad how routine this conversation has been. Even, we've been on this podcast for a couple months now, and it seems to be a recurring story. Not because we enjoy it, but because it's what's important in the news right now. And it's kind of sickening that with it also comes the same assassination of the characters of the victims. There's, for no reason should we even know this young man's criminal record, yet we're already all privy to that information without even knowing anything, little to nothing about the officer involved in the shooting. And so that's kind of where my mind takes me, is that as society we tend to protect those that fall behind that blue shield, and then for whatever other reason we just start victim blaming. And so that's something I'm still trying to wrestle with myself, and so I'm really interested to see your guys' take on this, because it's the first time we've talked about this together.
Yeah. Jim?
I suspect my opinion's probably not going to be super popular, but I don't really know. Once Blake got to the door of his car and opened it, what else was that cop supposed to do? He's reaching in there. For all the cop knows, he's been ordering him to stop all the way around the car. He didn't comply with that. He's apparently a non-compliant individual, and for all that cop knows, he's reaching in there to get a gun because he's at his wit's end for whatever reason. He tried to pull him back. It's an argument definitely it should be made that the cops should have seen what he was trying to do, get around to the driver's side door and stop him before he got there. But once he got there, the screw up had already happened, and you had to try to get the horses back into the barn. It's impossible. So they reacted, or I don't know how many of them shot him.
I believe it was multiple.
At least 2.
Yeah.
I think it would have to be. But anyway, it was a difficult situation for those cops to be in, and given that they were white and he was black, maybe they went out of their way. For all I know, I'm not excusing them. I'm just trying to get in the head of a cop who doesn't stop the guy before he gets to his door. Maybe he's black and I'm white, and if I attack him and wrestle him to the ground, that's going to look bad too. So I'm going to give him a chance. Oh my God, now he's at the door. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Dustin, what do you think, man? First, what's your initial response, and then maybe after you'd seen it and kind of absorbed it, maybe your second response?
Yeah, I'll be a little bit vulnerable to some of the things I wasn't real proud of. And my first thought on this was damn, I thought we were finally starting to get some healing, and it was starting to, not that there's still a long way to go, and so I was this has been going on for a minute, and it really kind of brought me back down to earth after about 2 minutes thinking. I was like, man, if you're getting tired of this conversation at times, think about what it's like living as a black man and woman in this country, that I get to turn this off whenever I go home at night. When I'm driving, I'm not in that situation thinking about the unfairness. So for me, it was a real quick reality check of we talk about some of that those little hidden privileges that sometimes we forget that. So that was something for me. It was kind of a humbling thing that I needed to make sure that I'm changing my perspective a little bit. And then my response to you, Jim, is, I mean, I share this on my Instagram, the same very, very similar situation of a white guy, really putting these cops in position, and it just goes completely differently. I mean, I think there's so many different levels where it can get to non-lethal force, where that it's hard to, like, a tase gun. And I might have missed this, but I didn't see a tase gun being shot when he was walking.
I think they had said that they attempted to use one and it didn't work. But at the end of the day, there are 3 bodies and to his one,
right?
And
did all 3 of them, because I didn't see. I didn't see a proper amount of that. And then at some point, close the door. Like, one person, be proactive. And I think there's so many different things. And I do want to say, I think JP said it really well, and it'll go understated in this, that this is always gray. I don't want to say that all 3 of those guys were racist, bad people, because that happened. It just comes down to the fact that this happens a lot more to black men than it does to other types of people in this situation. You just don't see this. You don't see this get caught with other, and it's something that we just have to. But it's tough. JB, I'll throw it back to you. What are some of your thoughts on stuff being said and things going on?
Again, man, it's if we're talking about holding people accountable, right? So it's very hard. I've been on the internet for most of the afternoon trying to inform myself on every moving part to this story that we're able to know, not being in law enforcement. But it's just like, man, there were 1,000 things that could have happened prior to shooting him. And I can admit to like more, I guess, conservative, like Blue Lives Matter type folks, like I understand that it's going to be extremely, extremely tempting to immediately look at this guy's criminal record, to immediately attempt to assassinate his character before all the facts are known. But when it comes down to it, nothing that he did and nothing that he's done are meant to be punished by death.
That's right.
Yeah.
So to me, you can't pick and choose which parts of the law and which parts of constitutional rights apply and which parts don't. And so if you really consider yourself a constitutionalist and you really consider yourself to be out for the rights of yourself and your fellow man, if it's an unarmed guy that gets shot 7 times in the back, mind you, and now, he survived, but he's paralyzed, there's an issue with that. And time again, there are white mass shooters, people that actually have weapons in hand, that not only are allowed to peacefully surrender to police and that are peacefully detained, but they get taken to Burger King afterwards. They get taken to get food afterwards. They get treated with more respect. And so, to me, if we're really talking about principles here, it's not that this guy was a saint. It's not that there wasn't any tough decisions to be made. The entire point is that same consideration is not extended to people of color at the same rate that it is, white people in the exact same situation.
Yeah, it's there's no way around it, man. To me, it's inexcusable. We don't hear stories from any other developed country in the world where an unarmed individual, whatever his or her race may be, is shot in the back 7 times.
No,
it just you don't hear that at all. And to me, it's simply unexcusable. And I know we're going to get into the response as far as the unrest and the riots that ensued. But on this podcast, we've talked a lot, fairly recently about police reform, and clearly there's been a breakdown on both sides, not being able to reach across the aisle to have a police reform legislation on a national level. But what parts of those measures that we've talked about, as far as body cams, a national database, which part of those do you think could have possibly prevented, I hate to call this a tragedy, but this incident?
Well, I'd like to see some body cam footage. Of that.
That's the number one issue here. I mean, one of the many issues here. No body cams with this police department,
and that's kind of a problem, with all that's going on, with all like Dustin opened it up. Here we are again, and with that backdrop, you really have to have some oversight at all times on those cops. They're entrusted with weapons, and they're given the ability to use deadly force if necessary. The problem is that it seems to be necessary with Black people far more often than with other races.
I would say I think that's a great question to ask, and I think it's sad that the question's not being asked more at higher levels. I really think that training is the biggest thing. That you talk about, the amount of time that they spend, the amount of time that I would love to see. And from what I've heard, the training they go through is a lot of stuff that's not the de-escalation training. It's not the handling of pressure. It's like basic procedural stuff that they have to do. So I would love to see if a cop's working 5 days in the week, every time, that's 1 day a week of training, where it's constant stuff of being able to de-escalate, being in situations like this, high stress. Because we know that in different situations, being able to deal with stress, being able to keep your blood pressure down, being able to think clearly is going to automatically, convert to better decision making under pressure.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's like, my experience, I can definitely say, like, my experience is not everyone's experience, but like living abroad for so long, I've lived in a lot of places that are much, much, much more peaceful and much less violent places. If we're talking about like in regards to crime and criminals, I've lived in places that are much more peaceful and less violent. But police officers have to not only have a degree, but it's like a year or two in an academy before they're ever even on the streets. And in most places in America, it's 6 months and no prior degree, no prior anything. And so I feel like if your argument is, well, there's a lot of guns here, it's dangerous, it's much more dangerous
seems
here.
to be the cop out.
That is the cop out, is that, well, crime rates are higher and these people are more dangerous. And it's like, well, if that's the case, shouldn't the quality of the law enforcement be, shouldn't the standard be higher? Shouldn't the standard match the level that you're saying that things are at?
That's a pretty high threshold to.
You don't lower the bar, you raise it.
Yeah. But that's interesting. And I think I'm not going to try to compare my job to that of a police officer. It's completely different. But Jim, like what you're saying, a simple step of just having a mandate for body cams, like me being in front of a camera, like every hour of my job now in front of Zoom, like even that makes me kind of think twice about the words that I use, or, my tone or something. So I can imagine that. I'm not saying that it was going to change the situation, but maybe being used to having a camera on your chest at all times, when you punch in on the clock, maybe you're thinking twice about, every action that you take.
That's a great point. I agree. You will make sure that you cover your bases. If this guy really is a bad guy, then you definitely, knowing that you're on camera and he's on camera, you're going to cover your bases. I'm going to make sure that everybody who's watching this later understands that
I'm doing it by the book.
Yes,
it's the same. It's the same principle as, like, well, imagine the things that were happening. I mean, we were born in an era before smartphones, but they've existed for the majority of our lives. Imagine how many things have happened where, the comings and goings of a shooting are strictly left up to the police, the police accounts. And so before smartphones, the standard was even lower. So because the average citizen has a smartphone with a camera now, okay, the accountability is raised a little bit. Now, if every police officer in the country has to have a body cam turned on, now the accountability is even higher, because it's like, well, if you turn this off, then there's a punishment for that. There's some accountability. But if everybody's got a body cam and it's on, then it's just the same way as if you're in a classroom, or if somebody's observing your job, you're held to a higher standard. And it's like, how is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think those are important points. I would just, my last thing is going to go right back to what I was talking about before. I think we see police, militarized in a lot of different ways that I think we all disagree we don't necessarily love. Why not take it one step further? And the one thing that's positive, and train and put yourself and prepare like they do. Like I think taking on some of those things where there's de-escalation, they're talking about going into foreign areas and how you need to, I like to listen to a lot of that, because I try and be around on that. So when they talk about, like, when they go into different war zones, they're taught get to know that area, get to know those people. It's much easier to not shoot at someone whenever that seems like a friendly face instead of a strange, unknowing person. So, but I agree. I think all these things are important, and we'll continue this conversation in topic number 2. But just wanted to kind of
the response, I guess, has now overtaken Kenosha, and now it's become pretty clear that this has sparked an outrage across the nation. But in the city in which it happened, in Kenosha, it's getting pretty serious. There have been, you could define them as riots. There's been both peaceful protests and non-peaceful protests, and our Preston, our guy that's running the video right now, is from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and is kind of given a firsthand account of, got family and friends that are still there, and that the city's essentially in flames right now, because not just because this happened, but because the police department still hasn't released the name of the officer that did it. And big surprise, he's not been arrested. And it's like, hey, if you get arrested and charged with something and then evidence comes out and you're not guilty, then there you go. But they're protecting him. He's not been arrested. And so there's been a response. And now armed militias have also come into the picture, and that brings us to to our next thing. A 17-year-old militia member, if you could even call it that, came from 30 minutes away in Illinois, crossed the state border with a gun that he is too young to even own legally, I think, and ends up killing 2 people. during the protests. And so now it's devolved. It was already an ugly situation, and now it's devolved into something even uglier, is what it seems.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of piggyback off a point Dustin. I think Dustin made a great point when he wrapped up, and he just talked about as far as the trainings and being familiar with the community that you're working in and that you serve. And I think Justin, with this response, we're certainly going to see federal troops that are going to be they're going to be called upon to respond to Kenosha. But these are outsiders again, right? These guys are not familiar with the area. They're not familiar with the people. And that just kind of adds to the experience there, or the conflict that's going on in a sense. So I don't think we're anywhere close to seeing the end, especially with the police department kind of sitting on their hands, and they haven't done anything but a paid vacation.
What you said though is interesting, because it's, if you talk about outsiders coming in, it's like, well, let's look at the people that are from the inside that are working there. And it's like across the country, it's not that there aren't problems in big cities as well, but it's like in a lot of these areas in the Appalachian region, in the north, the Rust Belt and stuff, in a lot of these places, and then now even in the Midwest, it's historically speaking, a lot of the most racist places and a lot of the most violently policed places are, they're the most deindustrialized, deinvested places in the country, right? Mm-hmm. So not only do you have economic tension, and I think we can all agree that racism is pretty much one of the lowest base impulses of human culture, and it's just like, whenever you're talking about areas that are already pressed and like already struggling, now you've got people that can't find jobs. And so it works both ways, right? Like one community is really disaffected and has to turn to certain things, and then it's like with police, it's like these are frustrated people holding these jobs. They're not always happy people that are policing these already pressed communities.
Yeah.
Sean, can I ask you a follow up on that? Just maybe even a clarification. So what would you recommend if something happens like this? You're like, what would you recommend a governor, an area doing where clearly there's some unrest at the local police, bringing in what would be like a common sense solution to try and both try and calm down what's happening in your community, but also try and be responsible in how you do it?
Yeah, I guess if we'd use let's use our own state for an example, because I'm not familiar with law enforcement in Wisconsin, but if there were what I would like to see is if an incident happened here, like in San Antonio, and it involved like an SAPD, that a special investigations is held by like the state troopers, in a sense, like, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to take over this investigation. Y'all are completely hands off. You're going to turn over all evidence, all body cam footage, witness testimonies, police officer testimonies, and it's handled by a complete outside agency that's oversaw by by another special investigations committee that's going to answer directly to the Attorney General of the state. That's what I would like to see, and I know some of those measures are in order already. And to my understanding, the AG is kind of up in the air right now too. I think the AG of Wisconsin is kind of leaning, from what I heard, is leaning on the side of this being a justifiable shooting in a sense. And so I can't confirm that 100% right now. But just still interested to see where it goes from here, because I know that if they don't arrest that police officer, or if they don't at least fire him, like, I don't expect to see that city, to stop being burnt until one of those two things happen.
Let me ask you guys something too, and it may be backtracking just a little bit on this, but how important do you guys think? I would put this as one of like the highest things is finding priors of police officers. Like most of these guys, I'm assuming, like, especially in the bigger cities, they don't probably start that way, but they become seasoned, and they become, being in a certain area for a certain time, they become creating negative stereotypes that put them into, and most of these that I've seen, this is not their first incident. It's not their second incident. It's not their third. And they're trying to figure out a way to be able to properly police each other. And that seems like a very common theme. How prevalent do you think that is, Jim? That's something like, and do you think that's a fixable thing?
Well, unfortunately, I think when one of these guys has an incident like this, and it turns out that through whatever mechanism there is, it's found that he was justified in whatever action he took, then he might maybe relax a little bit and feel like it's okay to do that again, maybe kill another guy because I can justify it using the same logic that I got away with it here with. And that is problematic because then these guys feel like they're bulletproof, so to speak. They're, invincible, I guess is a better term.
Well, they're also, and I mean, there's also like there's hardly any incentive to speak out when
Right.
I've spoken, and there's
probably opposite of that. There's incentive to stay quiet.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I'll say this again, my experience is not everyone's experience, but from a few police officers that I know, I've inquired about this, and like these are people that have office jobs now, and it's like they've expressed that like there's certain times where they've heard things, certain language used, and like really, really fucking problematic views expressed in the office towards minorities or towards people, people of like LGBT people, like all down the line, right? Like things that would be fireable offenses in any other workplace. But they've said like if we speak out, or if someone speaks out, you will be blackballed and you'll be pushed out, or your ascent up the ladder will be effectively stopped. And so to me, it's like, whenever you see one of these, thin blue line bullshit things, it's like, that's a part of what that means, is that it's not just supporting law enforcement, it's law enforcement supporting law enforcement. And so it's not always this positive thing. A lot of times it's staying quiet or supporting somebody when something negative happens. And that's the culture that has to change. And so when there's all these, really big calls to, defund the police and to whether it's withdraw funding or abolish things, it's like, well, even if you're not talking about fully withdrawing funding, I think the one universal call would be like, hey, this is kind of a toxic culture in states across the country. It's not isolated to one region, and that's something that needs to be examined at least.
Yeah, I think it's fair, and I'm not trying to circle back to what I'm talking about or my original question, but Justin, I'm right there with you, man. And I think the number one thing, like if you're really trying to change things, like legislation at the federal level, at the national level, like that's a big deal. But you really need to hit the culture, where it counts, and you have to have accountability where police officers aren't afraid. Like if I don't speak up and say something, now my job is on the line.
Now that's when you should be afraid for your job. That's when you should be afraid for your career.
But I say that to say, like, it is also fair to say in this specific circumstances, like, how does any of that change what happened, what we saw, on that viral video? I don't want to. The part of me just doesn't want to chalk it up to be like, man, that's just an unfortunate incident, because that's not doing it justice.
I don't think it's doing that, though. I would push back a little bit on that. I'm saying that finding some of the, if there's step 1, step 2, step 3, if we see a pattern of this, if you nip that pattern in the bud at step 4 before it gets to this point, that's not minimizing the tragedy that was. To me, that's just trying to be proactive, not just. I mean, I think everybody in the world that we're fortunate to have a little bit of a platform here. I think it's important to talk about how terrible this was, but also I think it's a great opportunity to talk about what are some ways that can be fixed.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily, and I'll give it back to you on that. But like that's what I would say is it's not minimizing. It's like, hey, how do we stop this shit from happening?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's talk about that. We'll kind of stay with this individual point, but like the NBA players, it was breaking news today, had decided to take a stand against the shooting of Jacob Blake. The Milwaukee Bucks were the first team to decide they were going to boycott. They were playing against the Orlando Magic in the Game 5 of their series. Hours later, the Lakers and Blazers chose to do the same. And also, actually, right before we came on, the Brewers and Reds in the Major League Baseball decided to boycott their games as well. So we won't stay on this one that long. I don't think this one's quite as important as the actual thing that happened, but I think it's very interesting. And this is the first and second and third time since like 1961 that a game has actually been boycotted. So it's pretty interesting, that comparability of the times too, that it's just an interesting time. So JB, we'll go ahead and start with you.
It's unique. I mean, we're living in really unique times, man. So I think I can speak for all of us and for anybody that's into basketball in the country or the world. It's like everybody's really excited for the playoffs to come back, but I can't help but admire and kind of respect the decision that was come to by the players. Not management, not teams. It was by the players, because when you think about it, people get really comfortable. People get they get to a point where it's like, well, basketball's back on TV, and
they're literally in a bubble.
Yeah, they're literally in a bubble. And so when it comes to sports, and when it comes to sports at the level that they're played, and I mean level as in talent and level as in money in America, the only way that these guys can use their platform really, other than interviews, is with something like this. And so the only way that you change the culture in America, unfortunately, is with money. And that's a sad reality. But when it comes to a capitalist society, if those corporations that the owners run, and those corporations that sponsor teams and so forth, and that profit immensely from the existence of the NBA, if their pockets start to hurt, now they're at least listening, right? So whether they agree with you or not, or whether they actually take any action, it remains to be seen. But that's how, in America, that's how you get someone's attention, is through their pockets. And now if they don't go forward and they don't play the rest of the playoffs, I don't know what will happen. But it's at least one of those things of where you might not agree with me, but you're going to hear me.
Yeah.
Sean? I think the average person kind of sees this as almost like an emotional reaction from the NBA players. And I just want to remind everybody that before everybody entered the bubble, before the pros entered the bubble to get basketball back on TV, there was a lot of debate already as far as, if they were being kind of insensitive to the movement that and the progress that was made, after following the George Floyd killing. And so I think right now they're kind of taking a couple steps back and asking themselves, how important is basketball right now in the bigger picture. And I think, like, man, it's just speaking as a coach, like, being a great basketball player and all, like, that's awesome. Like, we want to win games all the time, but like when we're talking about like end game, like final product, like we're trying to put men out there, right, in the world. And so I think it says a lot about these individuals. And then just to kind of follow up, I think, from a fan's perspective, of course we want to see the best compete against one another right now with the playoffs on. And some people might be scratching their heads as far as like, what is this actually accomplishing? I think these guys, they're kind of taking the time to process this as well, and I think, they're having to process their emotions and ask themselves, what role do they play in this by ignoring the issue and continuing to play? And I think that's fair and reasonable for a person to say, to have a position of, well, fuck, I can't just not go to work tomorrow because you're not one of the top 350 whatever
basketball players in the world,
whatever profession you're in right now. You're probably not the top 350 in the world right now.
Well, think about this.
The rules are different for them.
When's the last time that you can remember that any major athletes, so like we can group the entire league, we can just say like they're the most elite basketball players in the world at the moment. But when's the last time that athletes at that level took a political stance on anything when it came to, and not just a political stance that involved them not competing? And it's like Muhammad Ali comes to mind
for sure, but
I can't think of another time since then where athletes have literally said we aren't playing because we're bringing attention to this, and until this is solved, we're not going to be a part of it.
Let's ask our resident historian on the panel.
By historian, we mean our elder in chief, Jimmer.
Nothing leaps to mind, honestly. It's exceedingly rare if it's happened. I can't think of a time in history.
I would give someone very recently, Maya Moore. Retired from her basketball career to defend people. So like I would give a huge shout out to her. People, she gets slept on as a female athlete, but she was a top 5 player in her prime.
And I don't even think you could compare her. I mean, it's not to diminish what Kaepernick did or anything like that, but Maya Moore was very much.
She went and did things.
Yeah. And for the women's game, that's the equivalent of Giannis or somebody like that saying, "Hey, we're not going to play." That's a good example.
Kaepernick, by the way, he didn't quit. He had basically outlived
so
his usefulness.
He didn't necessarily.
There wasn't really
it's a little bit
definitely
different.
Could have played. We could go into that a different podcast. He was definitely a top 25 quarterback. But I would just say that I think what I think is really cool about it, and I think it's like Sean and I thought said it really well, that's the type of that's a grown man decision. That's what you want your players to do. And regardless whether you agree with it or not, what this does is sparks conversation. this sparks like it's impossible on every ESPN ticker. They're not able to just play their games and put it on TNT. The analysts are having to talk about it.
Yeah.
The coaches are talking about it. The players are talking about it. The fans that are watching the game. Kenny the Jet Smith walks off. I mean, that's the stuff.
Well, that's the thing is that
at least for 24 hours, we're talking about this.
Well, no, and the
that's
bubble,
a big deal.
It's like it's not a COVID thing. The bubbles basically already provided a case study of how to handle that, and it's like they're healthy, they're in a controlled setting. The money's there, the court's there, the media's there, so they're fully able to play, and there's no excuse other than, hey, we're not gonna place basketball above social justice. And so it's a whether you agree or not, it's a unique thing, and it leaves you no choice but to examine it and to see how you feel.
So one real quick point I've been wondering about ever since I found out about the boycott. So these guys, if this is to be meaningful at all, they need to be willing to forego their paychecks for as long as it takes until this is no longer a problem, right? The NBA has been very supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to pay them anyway? Are they going to insist that they be paid anyway?
It'll be
TBD.
That's
exactly.
an interesting.
Exactly.
We're in the first 24 hours,
right.
But it is an interesting.
It's something to think about. And if they pay them anyway, then what are they really foregoing? They're not playing, for a while, but they're still scooping up those gigantic paychecks. And many of them don't need those paychecks anyway at this point. If they didn't make another dime, they're set for life.
I think what you'll see is probably you'll see just the same way as certain players opted out of the bubble for different reasons. I think you might see that if this moves forward. So if they say, hey, we're gonna go forward with the games, I could definitely foresee some players just saying, listen, I'm not a part of this anymore. I'm opting out. And then we'll circle up next season and see where it goes. But I could definitely see some guys stepping out if they try to continue the game.
If this is very much player led, like we're all assuming that is, or we're hearing, do you think this is going to be a case where the powers that be, the Chris Pauls, the LeBrons, these voices, these large voices, can we safely assume that they're going to get together and almost chalk up what the rest of the season is going to look like? Is it to that point?
Yeah, I guarantee they're already talking about it.
I mean, and we don't live in different times. I think maybe we've seen eras where guys and where certain athletes can kind of stay silent and not be judged one way or the other. And it's like I feel like even if the guys aren't thinking this far ahead, I feel like there's some sort of consciousness where people realize, hey, history is going to judge your advocacy, and it's also going to judge your silence. And so in 20, 30, 40 years, you don't want to be that person that was silent when you had a giant platform, and you don't want to be that person that was on the wrong side of history. And so I think with these guys, I don't think that in 20 or 30 years, if they continue the course that they've started today, I don't think anybody looks back on that. It's like, wow, you really killed the game. It's going to be looked back on favorably, I think.
Speaking of how people look back in 20 years on things, let's go on to the RNC kicking off their convention Monday. Monday was led off by Nikki Haley, and Tuesday was by Melania Trump. Sorry, Miss First Lady, and the rest of the Trump clan. What are your guys' thoughts on the convention so far?
Sean, lead us off, man.
Oh God, I hate y'all.
Sean really enjoyed Tuesday's part with Melania. You were talking about she transitioned really well from talking about supporting the minorities and coming from a different country.
Sean, what do you think? What do you think the important the key points of the Republican approach to November is? Like, what things are they hitting on that you feel like they've got to do to keep their base and to energize their base? What would you say?
What would they have to do? Shit. I think it'd be extremely easy if your party was just a little bit more inclusive, and maybe if you kind of tried to reach out and understand and empathize where a lot of these minorities and how they're feeling today living in America and what it's like to be living in America during a pandemic. I think it'd be extremely easy for them to get reelection, but I'm also not going to speak on something I didn't watch. Okay. And so like we talked about last week,
Sean didn't do his homework.
I didn't do my homework. I've been locked into my job and my family.
It's been busy teaching your damn kids.
But I did catch that. I did catch like the lineup in the sense of who is speaking, and so I do. I find a great way. Yeah, I find a great way of forming together a good question just to throw it back on you guys that did your homework.
Nice one.
And so I saw the lineup and I saw that, not only did 2 of Trump's kids speak, so did his wife, right? And then you also have to consider Ivanka and his son-in-law, Kushner, being a part of the administration.
They're on the docket.
And so what I want to ask you, my perfectly formed question to kind of get this off my back is whether this is Trump's, whether he's a one and done president or whether he goes to a second term, what do you think the lasting impression of Trump is going to be, considering that he has kind of this, this circle of nepotism in a sense where he surrounded himself with his family that are all younger than him? Like, is when he loses, whether it's this term or whether he steps away after 2 terms, is he step away for good, or what's his role within the Republican Party?
I'm gonna push this to Jim because, guys, I've got a whole just wrath of Zeus waiting to come down on this shit. But I'm gonna pass this to Jim. Trump's
his legacy following his presidency.
What do you think his involvement in politics is going forward after this?
His involvement in politics will be virtually non-existent. That's what I think. I think he's going to go away and count all the money that he's scooped up by the decisions that he's made while president. And I really don't think he gives a rat's ass about the people, any people, except himself.
So I'll give my quick takeaways then I'll roll it back to JB's Wrath of Zeus. That the thing I saw was that the RNC had clearly watched the Democratic playbook on culturally pandering to their base. I thought that was I almost thought I was watching the Democratic primary. They just seem insulated from the most important issues. Both the Democratic and Republican Party just didn't talk about how we're in a pandemic where many people just can't pay their rent. They can't buy food. And it was alarming to me to see that neither party has just any idea of what's going on right now.
No, not a clue. That
was a big one. The ones that I saw I saw the most was school choice, experimental health options if you're terminally ill, opioid reductions, obviously the Second Amendment, tax cuts, deregulation, and opportunity zones, which the opportunity zones, from the research, they have not been very productive, but according to the RNC, they have changed many lives.
School choice is just a fancy term for privatization of education. So
yeah,
they mentioned that, I would say 15 times. Do you think that's fair from what you had heard? That was to me maybe the most commonly said, which I was shocked that was kind of the thing that they were.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden is a raging socialist. And then my last thing, like, he'll be the funny thing with that, it's really they brought people from Cuba and all these different socialist countries. And then I just want to, like, those of you guys that do think that Joe Biden's a socialist, I just want to bring up this point and, like, I want you to know that the Democrats hit AOC. They hit her. They didn't mention her one time. She spoke one time, and it was literally for the person that ran opposed to Joe Biden. It was talking about Bernie, and the Republicans talked about AOC 10 times in the first 2 days. So you care more about AOC than Joe Biden does. So just
100% true.
I'm just giving the points that I've seen. If you're thinking that he's a socialist, that was my last take. JB, bring down your Wrath of Zeus.
All right, guys. So for any of you that, and I don't want you to bring up the DNC because we attacked that. That's all right. We attacked that viciously last week, and rightfully so. But if you watched the RNC so far, if you watched the first 2 nights and you thought to yourself, hey, this is awesome, or hey, this makes even this much sense, this is for you. Going down the list, right? Trump speaks in South Carolina the day before. He's talking to a crowd in South Carolina. He mentions Obama. A guy yells out, "Monkey." Trump says, let's be nice. Then stops and laughs about it and says, only in South Carolina. Then he says, if you really want to make them mad, say 12 more years. Yeah, 12 more years. That's that, and he's not kidding when he says that. Then if I'm going down the list here, the easily easily the scariest RNC speaker thus far was Kimberly Guilfoyle. She's a senior Trump advisor. Absolutely just raging. Like if there was an American V for Vendetta, if she could be in that film speaking on behalf of the dictator, and it would have been totally believable. Nikki Haley comes on, claims that America is not inherently racist at all, when she herself goes by her middle name because her first name is Nimrata and she's raised by Indian parents. And in 2016 says that she couldn't support Trump because he wouldn't disavow the KKK. Black speakers, it's almost like they're used as props. Like the Kentucky Attorney General is used, and it's just, well, Joe Biden, you said that you're not black if you don't. I have my own voice. I have my own thing. If only you cared enough about prosecuting the murderers of Breonna Taylor as you did preparing for the RNC and for that bullshit speech, maybe there wouldn't be riots across the country. There were speakers that are QAnon supporters, conspiracy theorist supporters. Abby Johnson got to speak. She's a pro-life advocate who also advocated on air for household votes, that being that the husband decides the one vote for the household. So just an absolute scary shit show based on fear. And they're very much, the one thing I will give them is that they're much more politically focused than the Democrats. So like what we talked about, the Democrats are too stupid to understand that your strength is with the populist movement. The Republicans fully realize who their base is and who they're speaking to. So guess what? Issues of race, issues of religion, and issues of fear. And so to their credit, they played to those fantastically thus far. But when Melania Trump is your least scary speaker and like your most steady speaker, maybe that's an issue.
Yeah, Jim, we'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
A lot.
I gotta follow that.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to?
Sorry, it was long. It was long-winded. I feel passionately about it.
A
In
lot
case
to
you noticed,
unpack, man.
Yeah, fuck.
Do you want to talk about how Rand Paul was able to just talk about Joe Biden's shit
Yeah,
record
where's
in the
his
war?
where's his neighbor at? Give me Rand Paul's neighbor. I'll pay for that.
Jesus.
But Jim, what were your general thoughts? Sorry for having to follow JB.
It's just I've only seen maybe a little bit more than Sean because I also have some, I'm a very busy guy.
You saw a commercial?
I saw a commercial and I said, that's who they're appealing to. But what I did see was a lot of vitriol. These guys, those Democrats they're gonna come and they're gonna take all your guns and they're gonna put all, they're just gonna be running amok and you won't have any freedom because Democrats are gonna take it all. They're gonna take over. They're just everything. Their entire platform is nothing about what they're gonna do, but what you don't want is what the Democrats are going to do. And here's what they're going to do. They're going to screw you over in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah. I think that, in comparison with the two, I think JB in his thing, I think was fair as well. In the fact that they're just so much more disciplined and they're so much more on point. Like you watch that and you're like, well, man, this is all crazy.
Yeah.
But it's just the speaker after speaker after speaker, they're going to raise taxes on 82%. They're going to add regulations. They're going to be soft on China. They're going to take away your guns. They're going to take away your religion. They're going to kill kids. And it's just like each speaker, boom, 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 boom. And then every once in a while it's trickle in a minority. Hey, I like Donald Trump. That means he's not racist. And then boom, boom, minority. I like Donald Trump. That means he's not racist.
They had the
politically, it's genius.
Yeah, it is. I was like, if this was a boxing fight, it'd be 10-8. It'd be 10-8.
Dude,
RNC in the first round.
Hey, and I honestly, I feel bad talking about a kid this way. I guess I don't know. He's 18 or 19 now. I don't know. But the Covington, Kentucky kid that stared down the Native American there at the Capitol, the MAGA hat kid. I really don't. Absolutely, just dumb as hell, and just really, really an awful segment of an already awful RNC. But it's like you have this kid talking about cancel culture, and it's like, again, that's a thing. Like that's you're playing to exactly what your crowd wants to
They
hear.
hit the right keywords.
Right. And so where that differs is that with the DNC, Republicans know exactly who they're trying to get to vote for them. They're not trying to gain anybody. They're not trying any outreach. Whereas the Democrats, for all you conservatives at home, if there are any that watch this show, trust me, you don't have to worry about the DNC platform being socialist or far left. It's like they tucked them away. Like Bernie got 8 minutes, AOC got 1 minute. They tucked them away safely, and they didn't want them to be seen.
Life won't be changed if Biden gets elected.
And that's where your huge base is. And it's like literally nothing will change for you if Biden's elected, other than he won't say racist shit and won't be as embarrassing. But the RNC is playing that card to where, hey, if Biden gets elected, you just get this is about to be Venezuela 2016. Like, look out.
It's to me, let's just go straight back when you talk about in 17 and 18 when Republicans held the executive office and Congress. Like, the only thing that they were absolutely able to get through was a tax cut for the wealthy. Yeah. And so, like, if that really shows where your priorities at when you dominate two branches and you're able to push legislation through, it kind of shows like Trump's priority they weren't his campaign promises. It's lining the pockets of the corporates, and that doesn't sound anything to me like an outsider that everyone wants to paint him to be. Like, oh, he's this outsider. He's not a part of the establishment. He's still a fucking billionaire that is only worried about the wealthy.
Well, no, and isn't that appropriate though? That's unfortunately the way things work in this country, is that if you play to the millionaires and billionaires and give them the tax cuts that they seek, those are also the people that own media outlets. Those are also the people that own every means of production. And so those are the people that control the society. And so
plutocracy.
Yeah. And so when you take care of those people, they take care of you. Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunately how it works. And so they're not interested in reaching out to working Americans. They're interested in distracting, confusing, and misinforming working Americans. So as long as they play to those millionaires and billionaires, which they've done handily, they'll be successful, and that's the unfortunate part.
Well, we'll go ahead and move on. But before we move on to the sports segment, the RNC's got you in a little bit of pain. You're a little sore. Maybe you've been pumping iron in the garage. Maybe you've been working out to some Coldplay. That's
Jim's over here. I listen to Tool, not Coldplay. Damn it, Tool.
Go to Natural Heights. Get your CBD oil. Stress, anxiety, joint pain, PTSD, insomnia. No more. Take you some CBD oil. You've got edibles. You've got a vape pen. You can use it however you want. You got water bottles with CBD in it. Whatever your choice. Get you some CBD. While you're doing that, while you're literally at Natural Heights, go like and share our podcast. So as we move on to our sports topic, before everything started going on with all the stuff, Luka was the headliner. 21-year-old hitting one of the toughest, side step threes to beat, the great Kawhi Leonard, former NBA, literally defending NBA champ, and the LA Clippers. Huge win. They get blown out game 5. But we're going to leave that alone a little bit more, and we're going to discuss to start, what is the ceiling to this guy? Who is a comparison maybe that this guy's career could follow? What are your guys' initial thoughts? And JB, since we know you're going to be very biased and talk a lot of love to this guy for the next great white maverick, tell us about your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I couldn't be more pleased. I ordered a jersey 3 weeks ago, but it was the wrong size, so I got tired of it and went and just bought one today. But no, man, as far as who you can compare him to, I don't think there is anybody. I think so. If you're talking about like a white player that's supremely skilled in his era, then maybe Larry Bird. But
it doesn't have to be a white player.
Yeah, well, no, you're talking about a guy who was the EuroLeague MVP at 18, and somehow American skepticism when it comes to European players, happened.
Is he white? I don't see color.
Okay, sure.
Well, he didn't hit that shot over a white guy. I don't see any reason in if he's a great player, he's a great player.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no,
And that the
he's supremely skilled and under athletic. That's the impressive part to me, is that almost everybody that you would mention as a top 10 player in the league is world class, as a world class athlete. Whereas Luka, I think you could argue for the league, is below average, is a below average athlete, but he's a big guard, he's strong, and IQ and skills are through the roof, and they're better than pretty much anybody else in the league at the moment.
I'm gonna give you guys a comp. It's not gonna be like they don't play necessarily alike, but just like how they came in, kind of already knowing what they do. Maybe a similar trajectory is, what about Kevin Durant?
Yeah,
Guy who came in as an automatic bucket getter. He knew exactly who he was. He kind of played like a vet within his first year. By year 2 and 3, guys were already like, this guy's next. This guy might not even be next. He might be right now. Yeah. I mean, as a very young player, starts competing. That was the first guy that I kind of was like, is that the fairest comparison?
That's a nice
trajectory.
It's a nice comparison, because if you put them next to each other, and even just talking about their games casually, it's like one's a very straightforward scorer,
right?
And the other one's kind of more of a
their games aren't
both.
The same.
Their games aren't the same, but as far as like how they hit the league and how they hit the ground running, absolutely. And Luka's just one of those things. Like he's making passes that Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson, who have seen a fair bit of basketball, they're referring to them as like legendary type passes. Like they're saying, man, this is not just high level. This is like passes that only a few guys in the league can make. And yeah, anyways, the fact that you're the 7 seed playing the Clippers at the moment, and a lot of people favor the Clippers to at least be Western Conference Finals, if not the finals. The fact that they've had zero answer for him, and the Clippers are one of the most like defensively imposing teams in the league. They're so long, they're deep, everything. They've had no answer for Luka, and he's done all of this with Kristaps Porzingis for about 2 games and a half, and the rest of that he's done without him. So he's played just as much with KP as he has without him, and still
bunch of spare parts.
They can't handle him.
Sean,
we mentioned KD, man. I really hope I hope he comes back next season and he's the KD that we all know and love, right? But in a world of KDs and Hardens, when looking at Luka, it's crazy to think that Luka wasn't the first pick in the draft, and people should definitely lose their job because of that. But I see KD, and KD to me is the full package. Like, he's not a phenomenal defender, but like he can dig his heels in when you need him to get a stop, right? And he's going to change
when he
shots
wants to
and
be.
contest.
He's a great defender.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah.
But and Harden, though his game is a little bit different than Luka. Clearly, they're both offensively minded for the most part. And I just don't want to see Luka's career kind of go down that path to where like he needs to be in the right system with the right coach, kind of like what Harden is right now. And I don't think he is. But I just kind of have, like, I guess on the surface level, I have some concerns as far as that. I would like to see him get after it a little bit more on defense and kind of take some pride and ownership in his matchup. He rebounds the ball very well on both sides, on the offensive glass and the defensive. But I love, you brought up Kawhi Leonard, current champion, still current snake. But I love him because
you're always welcome in SA Kawhi.
but I love him because that dude will get you a stop, right? Kawhi changes the game on both sides of the ball, and if Luka can begin to do that, if he can start playing passing lanes, get his hands on balls, get some stops, get those crucial box outs in those moments, like I'll be a bigger fan of his than I already am.
I think too, and I think that's an absolutely fair critique, Sean, that he's not the greatest defender, but I think we talked about it the same with James Harden, that when you ask a guy, he's at a 45% usage rating, which is just unbelievable. And you talk about guys like Durant and Kawhi and AD, those guys are in the 20s and low 30s.
They got some help.
And you look at Luka, I mean, to me, he's almost the closest thing to like an NFL quarterback, where literally every decision is being made by him. And, the thing I just, at 21, you see that guy, he's never worried about the guy guarding him. He's always worried about the help defense. Mm-hmm. He's one step where he's trusting that whatever move he's going to make is going to get by this guy. And he's looking at the second and third layer defense. And that stuff is is most guys, there's a lot of guys that get through their basketball playing career and they never get to that point. And for him to be doing that in his second year is almost true. You just have to be like, God, like what is this kid seeing that he's already, because he's going to improve. He's not even that good of a free throw shooter. His 3-point shooting is going to get better. I mean, with the reps, I mean, he's one of those guys that the biggest thing I worry about is the same thing with James Harden. Like, I think they're such special offensive players that you've got to limit their usage a little bit. You've got to put another good player to where they can be fresh late in series and late in the playoffs.
Well, and a lot of old school dudes won't like to hear that, but it's like Sean, my favorite player of all time is Dirk, obviously, but like Sean always rips on him because, you know, Sean's guy would be Tim Duncan. So Duncan was obviously elite on both sides of the basket.
It's a big shadow.
But at the same time, Duncan's usage is not what it would be as if you're running point, right? So with Dirk, it's also similar. Like, he wasn't a point guard, but I wouldn't have, before he got old, you know, before his last 2 or 3 years, he wasn't an abysmal defender. Guys weren't just putting him on an island, but it's like, he's not going to be this physically, I don't think Luka will ever be some sort of physically imposing defender, but the way he rebounds, the way he passes, everything he does on offense, it's like, you've got an almost fully complete player with other than on ball, you know, guarding the best guys in the world. Other than that, there's no holes in his game. There's no holes in his IQ. And he's got a lot of things that some of those really good two-way players will never have. They just don't see it the way he does.
And I think the next progression for him a little bit that is a perfect person to listen to and watch is Kawhi. Yeah. You watch how Kawhi is like, my dad's an AC guy. So like, Kawhi is the most, you know, functional, you know, relaxed air conditioner. Like I know, like I've been around that. Like my dad showed me that. So like he is a 2020, that air conditioner, like he does as little as he needs to do to get the job done. Yeah. He is the most efficient. Well, he is a Tesla. Unit. He is a Tesla. He is whatever thing that's like, you don't even have to hear him. He just
Ford Taurus.
That guy just gets to spots like Kawhi. You're talking about guys that are just like fun to watch, or almost like, you're just like, man, I'm really glad to be sitting a beer watching both of these guys. When Kawhi does something, I mean, we always want the next Jordan comparison, but to me, Kawhi reminds me so much. Some of those moves where it's a 2 dribble, get to a spot, fade away.
I'm trying to tell you nothing right now. I mean, we don't know if there'll even be a game 6 or what will happen, but at the moment, as a diehard Mavs fan, nothing in the world is scarier to me than Kawhi Leonard having a live dribble and making it to just like in the paint, just below the free throw line or right outside the elbow. When he gets to those mid-range spots, it's a done deal. Yeah. And I think Luka doesn't, you know, it's like, that's not something he does yet, but he's big enough to do it. He's skilled enough to do it. And it's just like, Kawhi's a guy that when he came out of San Diego State, you would never see him do any of that stuff. No. But because he played for the Spurs for a while, because he came into his own in Toronto and had the green light to do stuff like that, after a few years, now you've got this super, super unstoppable player on offense. And it's like, well, Luka's already putting up 40-point triple doubles as a 21-year-old. What will he be like in a few years?
So I haven't told you guys this yet, but I for a future podcast idea, I kind of put together my top 60.
It's before or after our fight?
Definitely after.
You guys, Dustin and Sean scheduled an MMA fight. We were going to move this table out, and Jim and I were just going to drink on the perimeter.
Where's my
Dustin
belt?
and Sean fought it.
Where's my belt at?
It's over there, the tap out belt. Yeah.
But where would you guys put? I have my number for him. Where would you guys probably put Luka in the top 10? Just kind of. I know it's putting you on the spot, but just him in general. Is he top 15? Is he top 10, top 5? What do you guys think with him being so young, but also giving so much? I know you're kind of doing y'all's math. Do you want me to go first a little bit?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I want to hear it. Yeah, Sean's ready.
I'm ready.
Sean's ready.
You could go next, son. I have. If we're considering KD is back at full strength,
I have him in my list. And Steph.
I have Luka just outside of the top 5, maybe it's 6 or 7.
I'm impressed, Sean.
Maybe it's 7. And I'm not going to list them all, but the Giannis, LeBron, AD. I still have Harden above him, Curry above him. The Dame is where we get interesting. The Dame is
not put him above Luka.
Oh, I don't know what to tell you right now. Luka hit a great game winner the other night, but Dame hit a series-ending game winner.
Can Dame make the same? can Dame make the same plays
On
that
defense?
don't involve him shooting the ball on offense? Can he do what Luka
But
does?
you're really making a very small, narrow box there.
No,
in
that's
your
a huge
question.
that's a huge box.
Okay, well,
That makes a big difference for how many points. If you're among the top offenses in the league, as the Mavericks are, it's important to have a guy that can do that.
well,
We are also 27th in defense. Just disclaimer.
Dame's a really
Out of
interesting
30.
one because I have him one spot ahead of Luka. I'm gonna defend Dame here with JB. I think JB's being a little disingenuous with how much he loves Luka. Let's talk about a couple things that like kind of got invented between either Dame and Steph. Trapping at midcourt, going over a ball screen in the backcourt, like that kind of stuff. Like Dame, I don't want to hear this. That Dame spreads the court out so much where it's almost not even the same sport as when other guys play. Like Dame and Steph are in their own little universe. I have Luka at 9. Luka is right in front of Jokic for me, and I am a big Jokic fan, so it's hard for me to do that. But that's a hell of love for Luka to already be there, and he's right behind Dame and AD. I mean, it's Dame, AD, and Steph in front of him, and then obviously a top 5 that I think.
Who is he right ahead of? You said Jokic?
He's right ahead of Jokic and Embiid and Clay for me.
Justin's a big Jokic fan, right?
Yeah. Jokic is 9 or 10.
Let me see what other guys on my list JB's probably a big fan of. Porzingis on my list.
You son of a bitch.
What's that guy from Utah?
Man, there's not a lot of guys he'd like. Oh, Vucevic he'd like. Oh, Nurkic.
Yeah.
Kevin Love. Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
I'll leak out my number 60 as Bogdanovich.
Oh, all right.
Now
for me, man, I don't even know. I don't know if I can. I won't say top 5 because then that'll just expose me as
you're already exposed. Do it if you want. Not a big deal.
I'm gonna put. I'd have Luka hovering in between 6 and 8. So 6th, 7th, or 8th, and I would have Dame and Jokic are the final 2 in the top 10. But yeah, I mean, I just a rushed list here. I'd have LeBron, Kawhi, KD, Giannis, AD, and then after that, it's kind of a toss up between Luka, Harden, Steph, Dame, and Jokic. But that's a pretty damn talented field. So it kind of depends on what you consider to be good basketball. But when it comes to the offensive side of the ball, Luka just gives you, other than highlight dunks, he gives you pretty much everything you need.
I had me thinking. I said I'm the guy I like to do lists and stuff. Would you now is Luka now the guy, like we like to this like nerd basketball thing? If you had a fantasy draft and age matters, is Luka now your number 1 pick, or does Giannis it's right? It's basically those two, right? Are you sticking with, like, if you have to pick, like, if you get the opportunity to pick one of those two guys, are you picking which one of those guys do you think has a higher ceiling and potential of bringing you championships?
I think Justin is Luka 1, Tyler Herro 2. I'm definitely. I don't know if he's a number 1 pick, even considering age just yet. I'm not
Damn.
sure.
How many guys that are older would you probably still put like in their 28s? Because all those other guys are in their 30s.
I think Kawhi has a lot of good
to me,
basketball. left in him.
Kawhi, AD, and
Kawhi's
Giannis, I would say
are over him. And
as big of a Dallas and Luka fan as I am, to me, and 6'7" not small, but when you're talking about Kawhi, the length that he brings, the top. I would say he's the top defender in the league. He didn't get Defensive Player of the Year, but top on-ball guy in the league. Him and then AD and Giannis, there's a reason, if you see a tall person and somebody meets them, they're like, oh, do you play basketball? It's like, that's for a reason. Those guys are stat stuffers, and they're people that you can build a team around. So Luka's a once-in-a-lifetime talent, but so are those guys, and they're 4 inches taller and can do.
Jim, considering that Justin took Gordon Hayward off the board, like, what do you think, man?
So mad.
Goran Dragic is still there. Don't let JB have him on the way back.
I kind of wish you had come to me first, because I would have said somewhere between 6 and 10, not knowing shit about basketball.
It sounded right.
And now I find out I was fucking right.
Right.
You're there.
We need to start with you on those.
You guys are so dumb.
I really thought when I asked this question, there'd be someone who'd say Luka's number 1, and you guys have him maybe at 3 or 4. He's a 21-year-old. Look, this Clippers roster is freaking loaded. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we're underestimating. Like this is the team that everyone rightfully thinks is going to win the championship.
No, and when I said
And
I
they
don't
split it.
know, I'm saying like if I'm picking the team, I may well pick Luka first. I'm just saying those three guys. I'm not going to bat an eye at somebody that says I would take them over Luka, but it's like for the fact that the Mavericks got him is still amazing to me. Like the fact that they traded up, and it's no shade on Trae Young, but it's the fact that they got a EuroLeague MVP for a guy that, yes, he lit it up at OU for a year. It's like he lit up the Big 12 for a year, but you're talking about a guard who is 5 inches taller
What are you
and
pointing at me for? Fucker.
it's a matter of yeah. But yeah, it's amazing that the Mavs have him. And it's just I don't think that's why it's exciting to be a fan at the moment, is like I've never bought a jersey of a guy younger than me, but it's like I'm not worried because number one, I'm getting old, and number two, he's a once in a lifetime talent. So whether or not you would take somebody before him is irrelevant. I don't think we've ever seen anybody that plays the game quite the way he does in the NBA.
I don't think he's anywhere close to as good as Kawhi right now, which isn't a slight because Kawhi is just exceptional. But if I was starting a team, I would pick him over a Kawhi in a second. I wouldn't think about it.
But I think
Giannis is my number one, and I'm not thinking about it either. Because like you said, his efficiency on both ends. Like he is a guy, like if you have him, you can put shit around him and you're going to win 55, 60 games.
No,
but I think Luka in 2 years is going to be that guy too. This year they're in the playoffs.
No, and they're
and their
missing
second best player.
They're missing Dwight Powell, who's an ideal pick and roll center. They're missing Brunson. They're missing, they're not household names, but for their team, they're missing some big names. And it's like
no one other than Porzingis is going to make more than $10 million a year on an open market. And that's saying something.
No,
in the NBA.
and so you put some shooters and athletes around him,
yeah.
and he can make it happen.
Porzingis lost a bar fight to a pedestrian too.
He lost a bar fight to some Russians in his own country, so you got to be careful about that. I still love you, KP.
No toughness,
I don't, KP. I don't love you at all. I saw Luka's ankle touch the ground, and people were projecting that he'd be out for the year. And he shows up and balls out in the third quarter and hits the buzzer beater as his ankle touches the ground. And then Porzingis has no apparent injury and is a late scratch. So that's Porzingis. You have one person at the most with respect to you on this table.
I still love you.
So
KP.
you
Come back healthy, kill it, man. Teach these guys a lesson.
I hope they can trade you for someone who has heart so Luka can have an actual second big man. But that is about a wrap to the show. Jim,
send us
home.
Man.
Get the fuck out of here.
Jim, what? I mean, leave the viewers / listeners with something, something meaningful, man.
Next week we're going to talk about some tennis.
Oh,
what?
Mm.
That's not true. Don't believe that.
Tennis.
Tell them to buy some stamps or some shit, man.
You should buy stamps. Not that I care, because
Yeah, not that he's involved.
See you guys next week.
take care.
Be safe.